maybe when we're all done with that, if we finish with Robin, you can also explain the relationships that y'all share.
Sure.
All right. So I'm like reading off my notes. I know who I am. My name is Andrea Elliott. I am the wife of our head pastor, Pastor Elliott. We've been married for almost 15 years now, and what else am I supposed to say? Wait. Oh, I do have kids. I have 5 boys, ranging in age from 13 to 5. And I love them. They're adorable.
I love how casually she's like, and I have 5 boys. Not like that's like show-stopping information. I have 5. She has 5 sons.
Yeah, they're. I think. Do we have pictures up right now?
They're up
Okay, yeah, that's a big family unit right there. And I'll let my lovely sister-in-law introduce herself.
I'm Meghan. Am I supposed to say who I'm related to? Sorry. I have 3 children, 12, 9, and 6. I am Pastor Elliott's sister and her sister-in-law. And then this is my lovely mother.
I'm Robin Elliott. So this is my daughter Meghan, my daughter-in-law Andrea. I have another daughter, Maris, and then Pastor Elliott is my son. So we're all very well related here. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I think you guys know me. I'm Erica. I'm the director of women's ministry here. I am married to my husband, Mike. We have 4 kids ranging in age from 17 to 4. And I have the privilege of sharing with these ladies this morning and guiding the discussion. So, Robin, why don't you open us up with talking a little bit about the biblical precedent that we see in the scripture of God's design of the family unit.
Okay, be glad to. So our God is a loving God. He created Adam, put him in the garden to cultivate and tend it. And then the Lord looked and said, he needs a helper. And he created a wonderful love gift of Eve. And then he tells them in Genesis 2:24, where he establishes marriage, when he instructs them, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So this permanent monogamy was and continues to be God's great design for marriage. Unless we think that this instruction was only for the Old Testament, if you go to Matthew 19:4-5, you'll hear Jesus reiterate this when he says, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the 2 will become one flesh. So even though Adam and Eve did not have parents, this is the instruction that is now going to be passed down through all the ages from generation to generation. So once a new family unit is created, all things being equal, we have 2 sets of parents that are going into this marriage. And they have to realize that this leaving and cleaving has to take place for a strong bond in this marriage. So their children are going to have a different relationship with them. They're no longer under their authority indirectly or directly. And if they're very wise, they will realize that they have influence and that they need to wait to be asked to help or to share that influence. And if they do this well as the couple's learning to be married, then when the grandchildren arrive, it will be much easier for them to understand their role and to be cautious in how they approach that if there's some hesitancy on their children's parts. But it will help them understand their family life. But one very important caveat throughout this, as we're talking, is to always remember that all of our interactions, good or not so good with our family, should be motivated and directed by love for one another. Just as God demonstrated his love towards us, even though we were sinners, he still died for us. He loved us. And so that is a committed and covenantal type of love, which is what we want to show. So our working definition, as you're thinking love, is this: the greatest good at any cost for another.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I love that definition of love, the greatest good at any cost for another. And that can be really easy in relation to us and our children. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, us and our spouse, although that even gets a little tricky. But once you have this element of grandparents or in-laws, that's where the greatest good at any cost for another, you actually really start, I think, tasting the cost of that kind of love, right? Because sometimes, especially when we're joining two different people together to become one new unit, one new family, and then you have the parents of both of those people involved in the situation. I mean, now we're talking like 6 different people and different relationships of how everyone is relating to one another, and sometimes that can get hard. I think that in-laws can oftentimes have a really bad rap, right? Like we can say in-laws and kind of like roll our eyes, but I love bringing it back to this definition of love that should be there within our families of, hey, listen, I'm willing to do the greatest good for you at any personal cost to myself. So if we can keep that in our framework as we talk about and even interact with these relationships within our immediate and extended family, that's where we're going to see great benefit and great flourishing in the family coming forth. Awesome. Okay, well, I would love if Andrea and Meghan, if you guys would maybe speak a little bit to the importance or the value that you get to experience with grandparents being involved in your family unit, but then also individually, like your children's lives.
Well, as a Christian, I've been blessed to be brought up in a Christian home, and as Psalm 145:4 says, one generation shall commend your works to another and shall declare your mighty acts. So they're another source of biblical influence for us, another source of wisdom and biblical wisdom and in worldly wisdom. And what was the other one about my children? Sorry.
Yeah, just the influence that you see of a grandparent in your child's life.
She just gets to add that extra bit of love because, being a parent is hard sometimes, having to be the disciplinarian and all the things. And I get to see mom come in and just model that, yet just be able to do it with such love and ease and care for them and in the kindest way. She's just a really good example of that to my kids.
Ditto. First, I want to say that I've never experienced the whole negative aspect of in-laws. I've always been extremely blessed in my family to have a lovely mother-in-law and father-in-law. But the importance and value of grandparents is, it's amazing that just, 3 years ago, you were able to come out and have that close relationship that we didn't have before. My mom being in Ohio and you were in Michigan. So having that new aspect of just closeness and that love and care from someone else in the family. And even the excitement of my children finding out about how their dad was as a child and the stories that go on in that it's so awesome, and just that passing down of that legacy. But yeah, there is so much wisdom and just all the knowledge that they can pass down that has been passed down to us, but now that they are able to pass down to next generation. But then also, I know we use grandparents a lot as to go out on date nights or to go to certain events, but just to keep that mentality of the grandparent is not a babysitter. They are a part of our family, and to never have that, that casual, just like, oh, we'll call a babysitter type mentality and we call the grandparent. There's so much more than that, and I've been blessed to be able to see that in our lives.
Awesome. I think you bring up to a really good point of, as Christians, we hope and pray that the grandparents that have influence in our kids' lives are also Christians and are imparting that biblical wisdom and that legacy of faith to our kids. But there are certainly scenarios where you may have grandparents in your life that are not Christians or do not share those same values. And I love what you were talking about, Andrea, that even utilizing grandparents that may not have that same desire to impart biblical wisdom to our kids, in that, man, there's so much still and so much value that a grandparent can add to a child's life by way of sharing the family history, talking the stories about how daddy or mommy were as a little boy or a little girl, or even sharing about their grandparents or great aunts and uncles, and even just that historicity, passing it on to the next generation of who you are, where you've come from, how you fit into this family, and even just seeing those traits passed down through the generations, I think is really awesome. Okay, great. Let's go on to this question. I feel like this is a very hot topic in our culture right now, talking about like boundaries and not having, family members like cross certain lines. So when we think about that in a biblical framework, what are appropriate boundaries to have with grandparents and the appropriate way to frame the relationship that they have with you and your kids in your family's life?
Yeah, that is a hot topic. Word is boundaries. We love using that to protect ourselves from a lot of things. But I think boundaries is I think the right term if you think of boundaries as a fence and what you're keeping out or what are you keeping in, and that protection idea that goes into boundaries. And what are we protecting? We are protecting our family unit. Our immediate family of, like Robin said, the mother and the father, the husband and the wife coming together as one and being united, and we want to make sure to protect that and not make grandparents the third parent almost. So we do want to protect from that, but thinking of the opposite side of the fence or the boundary. I liked this little quote that, where was it? G.K. Chesterton said, it makes it possible for good things to run wild, which I think that's such an awesome way to view the opposite side of the boundary. You're allowing really great memories and fun things to happen with grandparents, which in order for great things to happen, there needs to be a little preparation for that. And just setting up the grandparents for success, having communication, having discussions beforehand, so that that environment that happens within those boundaries is flourishing and loving. But yeah, I think, Robin, you might be able to speak more on this as well.
Sure. Why not? I think when you're talking boundaries or you're talking like an overbearing grandparent that you might be dealing with, I would like to give you 4 rules of communication that I think are going to help you in that conversation and in any conversation that you're going to have. So you need to realize, though, that if things have to be addressed in a family, it's really best for blood to address blood. So it's Meghan would talk to me, or Mike would talk to me, and then the husband or wife, whatever it is, would talk to the other parents. You're not going to always get 100% agreement. You just have to know that going in. But the thing is that you want to be respectful, you want to be loving, and if you follow these 4 rules of communication, they can help you in all of your life. So be honest, but we're supposed to speak truth in love, right? But really consider your body language, consider the tone of your voice, even consider the words that you're going to choose to say. Keep current. Deal with only that issue. Don't open files and just start dumping on the desk. Keep current. Just deal with that. Attack the problem and not the person. This is very important. So you might be able to say something like, Mom, I love how you do this with little Danny, but I was wondering if we could talk through this issue. And you begin it with a positive, that you love seeing this, that you realize that there's value, but there is a concern, so can we talk about that? Or, Mom, I'm concerned about an issue in Danny's life and wondered if you would come along with me and help me address it. What are some ways that we could do that? Make them a partner in that. And they will love you for that they have input then in the little one's life. This is the hardest one. Act, don't react. And this is very hard, especially if you feel the hairs on the back of your neck start to go up. And then you need to take a breath and step back and realize that you need to act about what this situation is and not react. Otherwise, if you react, nothing's going to get addressed, nothing's going to change. But if you act with purpose and you're kind and you speak the truth in love and you bring them in as a partner, I think it might help. And these rules can be used in any relationship, but always remembering it's underpinned with love.
Yeah, I love that. I think, too, one of the great things to remember in communicating with a grandparent or, a parent is just that level of honor, right? The Bible talks that we are to honor our father and mother right there in the Ten Commandments. And so I think if we can really frame that when walking into a conversation where there might be some tension or there might be some pushback, is just remembering I am to show honor to this person, to show a level of respect to them, even if their conduct or their speech or whatever is not respectable. I need to honor the position that God, in His authority, has given them in my life as my parent or my husband's parent and my kids' grandparents. And so how can I address them in a way that is moving the ball forward, in the relationship, but also in a way that shows a lot of honor to them and the role that God has given them in me and my kids' lives.
Right.
That's great. Okay. One issue that people may deal with frequently is having a parent or grandparent that they feel is untrustworthy or trust has been broken in some way. How would you deal with that situation of dealing with a grandparent relationship where trust has been lost or you don't feel like you can entrust them with your kids?
Okay. So I think this is a very touchy subject, sensitive subject, and you want to make sure that you go about this wisely. But as a parent, our job is to protect our children. And if we don't see that is happening, whether it's physical safety or spiritual safety, I think we do need to address that, of course, in a loving way. And again, that's key. We want to make sure love is at the center of this. But yeah, I think it is important. Spiritual safety, obviously, we don't want there to be corrupt talk or anything visually coming in, whether it's from media or TV or movies. And we do want to make sure that we are protected in that way. So just being upfront, the act, don't react, putting those expectations, those even rules in place. For safety, though, I know that could be a common concern maybe for a lot of us, that if we have older parents. So we want to make sure that we're not leaving them alone at home if they do have physical limitations. That doesn't mean that grandparents can't spend time with their grandchildren, though. There are plenty of opportunities where, I think more than 50% of the time we are there when you're there, and that's not because we don't trust her. It's just, we like to be together as a family.
Thank you.
But yeah, I know that grandparents can be utilized as caretakers when we are away, but there's just a lot of great opportunities for grandparents to be involved in the grandchildren's lives while we are there. If physical untrustworthiness is a concern of yours, then that can happen. But thinking of just the fact that our parents, if we're thinking our grandchildren's grandparents, our parents haven't parented in a long time. Give them grace. And make sure that we're just upfront in discussions and expectations, I guess. And I guess in expectations, you could probably speak on what to really expect, whether it's real preferences or real top tier issues, or if it's just our little preferences that we have.
Yeah, I think what Andrea said is like safety. Sure, if a grandparent physically cannot run after your 2-year-old, so you want to set those boundaries. But also, if they're neglectful, that's, again, I think all of this stems back to communication. You and your spouse, or I forgot to mention I'm a single mom, I would discuss with Robin, hey, this is something that I'm seeing and we need to address this. But also talking about preferences too, because we all have them and we all have expectations. So I think just laying that down, especially for food. You think of grandparents, you think of going to grandma's house and all the delicious delights that they'll eat, and how sometimes that can be hard for us as parents to think through that, but like giving them the flexibility. Okay, can I think through this day? If they're going to grandma's Friday night, can they have that cupcake? Can I be flexible in that area? Because yeah, I have great memories of that with my grandparents, and I want to give mom the space to do that. Even though I would prefer them not necessarily to eat a cupcake, but can I do that? And also, what else was I going to say on this? On food allergies though. My son does have a lot of food allergies, so that's another thing for safety that you need to talk through with her. We cannot have peanut butter in the house, it's not safe. So yeah, that's not a preference, that's a safety concern. And then also, I think Andrea talked about entertainment a little bit, like just need to be upfront. Screen time is huge. It can go on either side of the spectrum. It can be all or nothing. So where can we find the, what's the right word? Where can we find the balance to give grandma the access she needs if she gives them screen time? And what are those boundaries, if you will, that you would prefer them to see or not see? So, and then help them. They haven't been parents in a long time. And hey, this is what's going on in the media right now. So we would prefer you not to let them see that. So it's just all about communication, really.
So I also thought of just because you might not have them, if you don't have the trust in them in certain areas, think about the good in their lives. There are so many things that, like I said earlier, like we said earlier, like wisdom being passed down, knowledge being passed down. There are so many things that we can allow our grandchildren to do with our parents that won't cross any of these lines. If your parents enjoy cooking, allow them to cook with your kids. If your grandfather likes to fix things around the house, that would be awesome. Like to have them pass on that knowledge of how to tighten a screw, how to hammer a nail. All those like little things that we can allow to happen that run wild within the fence of those boundaries, I think will allow our kids to have really amazing, useful, and lasting memories. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I think what I'm hearing you guys saying is when it comes to the issue of determining, if a grandparent, if it feels like it's an untrustworthy situation, is to really think through it in two categories. Do I feel that, this parent of mine or my spouse's is untrustworthy because it's like a safety issue or because it's my own preferences? And if it's a safety issue, then obviously that's a top tier issue that needs to be addressed. But if it's a preference issue, is really thinking through, can I bend on my preferences in this particular relationship to experience the benefits of a grandparent in my child's life? Mm-hmm. Am I awesome?
Absolutely. 100%.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, and I really agree with that because, it's the freedom that grandparents have to be fun, right? Mm-hmm. And to not be mom and dad that makes them grandparents. And like what you were saying, Megs, creates those lasting memories. Some of the best memories that I have with my grandparents are when my grandparents did not follow the rules, or we're like, yeah, your bedtime is 8:30, but we're letting you stay up till 9, and to a child, you're like, oh, and it creates these lasting memories of, oh, grandma and grandpa are so cool. They let me get away with stuff, within, the safety realm that this is all safe and and just creates those strong bonds and those sweet memories that we carry with us, I mean, even into our adult years. Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Robin, as far as from a grandparent's perspective, maybe having, I don't know if any of them have ever had to have these types of conversations with you of like, hey, you know.
They haven't had that conversation with me, but if they were to, I would want them to do it in a loving manner, considering their words and all of that. But they all set me up with the children to succeed, and I appreciate that. So Junior will always say, if you're with Grandma and she wants to get you an ice cream, you can have an ice cream, even if you've already had dessert. So I appreciate that he will do that with the boys. Whatever Grandma wants to do with you is going to be fine. Meghan does the same thing. I try to watch my time, though, for her, because I know she doesn't want a cupcake at 8 p.m. So I do try to understand their preferences, too, and use wisdom. So from my point of view, I've not had to have this kind of conversation. They have set me up for success with all my boys and my girl. And I appreciate that.
Awesome, thank you. How would you encourage someone who maybe doesn't have a grandparent nearby, either maybe they've passed away, or like what you were explaining, Andrea, for a long time in your guys' family life, both sets of grandparents lived like halfway across the U.S. So how would you encourage someone that may be experiencing that right now, where they don't have a grandparent relationship for their child? Where can they cultivate that? How can they encourage that sort of relationship for their child?
Go to Robin. Robin wants to be the grandmother
Grandma
of all.
Robin.
That's true. I have Timothy, who calls me Granny
Yes,
Robin.
my son calls her Grandma Robin.
I have a number of grandchildren here that are not mine by blood, but by heart.
Yes.
So I would say that, well, in both ways. If you have parents who live far away, for most of my children's lives, they grew up in Maine, away from their grandparents in Michigan. And but my mom was very intentional in how that she was part of their life. They always traveled at least once a year out to Maine and would spend 2 weeks with us, so that they got that grandparent time. They would push us out the door and tell us to go to dinner, and then they would have the grandparents. And my mother would take over the kitchen for the 2 weeks. I got a break. It was wonderful. And the kids loved that. And they saw Grandma making things, because she would crochet while she was there. They would make cookies together. They would just have a great, fun time. And then one of the other things that she would do is she went out, she found out what some of their books were. What are some of their favorite books? So I'll go get those from the library, or I'll purchase them. And back then, it was a cassette tape. They read those books with music in the background between Grandma and Grandpa, so they heard their voice. I put that on at night for them so that they would hear the stories. And so you can be very, very creative. Now, for me, I have a very different grandparent experience because of technology. My mother had to wait for me to have film developed to send her pictures of the kids. So that sometimes was, 3 or 4 months from the time that I took it to the time she received it. Whereas now we have FaceTime. I can see that child. I can talk to that child. So there are real benefits to that technology for a grandparent. But if you don't have a grandparent because they've passed away, there are other people within your family, probably an aunt or uncle, that could be grandfatherly, grandmotherly in that relationship that were related to your parents. That can be a help. The biggest place, though, that I found grandparents for my children was in the church. There were older couples there that loved my children. They would take them over. They would watch them if we needed to go someplace. Kay Marsteller had tea with Meghan on a number of occasions. She even spent the night there on a weekend. So there were people there that would pour into their lives and be that grandfather or grandmother influence that they didn't have because of distance or because of death. So I know that I benefited from my grandparents, but they also my grandmother had 10 siblings. So I had lots of people that I saw, and they could all be grandmotherly or grandfatherly. in their relationship with us as children. So that's where I would go. Did you guys have anything else to add?
I agree. Look within the church. There are so many older and wiser women in our church that if you think of the flip side of it, if you know people or if you yourself have, your parents are far away, there's probably people here that are older that don't have grandkids nearby. And it's a win-win. They get to be grandma. You get to have, a parent figure in your life, and your grandchildren get to benefit from that wisdom and even their legacy being passed down in a different way, and learning those things from an older and wiser person within the church.
Yeah, I love that. And like Robin was saying, my son actually, Timothy, calls her Grandma Robin. And recently my husband and I went on a trip back east, and we do have one set of grandparents that lives locally, but it was a crazy day and there was a lot of movement happening, everyone going from place to place. And so I called Grandma Robin and I was like, hey, Mike and I are going to be on the East Coast. Is there any way that you could come pick up Timothy and take him to his t-ball game? And she did. And he told me all about it when I got home, about how Grandma Robin came over and got him ready for t-ball. And she was sending me videos and pictures from his t-ball game while we were over in New York. And it was just so sweet and so special to still have that grandparent figure in Timothy's life and to get him to that baseball game, even when, the grandparents that do live by couldn't do it and we were on the other side of the country. So super sweet benefit of being involved in a church. Lots of benefits, but that's definitely high on the list, is having a church family.
And one piece of scripture that I think I would really like to share here as we're finishing, and then Erica, you can close it down however you like, is 1 John 4:7-11. It says, "Beloved, let us love one another, for love is from God, and whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. Anyone who does not love does not know God, because God is love." He's not just love, he's the definition of love. In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we have loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the propitiation for our sins. Beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. So God is love. He's the definition of love. We need to traverse all of these relationships that we have in our lives, especially the family ones, with love. And I love these verses for this time of year as we're thinking about Christmas, and Jesus is the reason for the season, that he sent us his greatest love gift. And his Son was willing to come and to be born, to live a perfect life, to become that sacrifice that would appease God's justice, which is what that propitiation is, that wrath absorber. So he loves us, and I'm going to end kind of like Kristen did. She said, God is holy, so we need to be holy. God is love. We ought to love one another.
Love it. I would love to end our time this morning if you guys could each just individually share a memory of a grandparent. That is my alarm going off, sorry. I would love if you guys could each share a memory that you have of a grandparent, just something special that sticks out in your mind, either, and this could go a lot of different ways, either your memory of a grandparent in your life, or as we're all moms, a favorite memory of watching your parent or your in-laws be a grandparent to your kids. Or Robin, even a favorite memory as a grandma. Yes. And I think that will help even give us all some good examples, but also spark some ideas of how we can maybe involve grandparents in our life and the life of our kids. Maybe we'll start with Andrea and go down to Robin.
That's a lot of different options to choose from. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can do this quickly. With my sons and Robin, just the interaction that they have multiple times a week. They always they always come back around and say, guess what we did? Guess what we did? And the excitement of the littlest things, we went to McDonald's and got a toy. It doesn't have to be big. It never, it could be the smallest thing. And even with my mother, having and making those opportunities, because she is in Ohio, phone calls and letting my phone be passed around to each kid and letting them talk to my mother, not interjecting, just allowing the phone to be passed and letting them have their own little conversations with her. They're really sweet moments, and I know that my mother, because she can't be out here very often, just cherishes those moments, because that's what she holds on to. She's alone, and so she wants to cling on to those moments. And knowing that I get to be, even just allowing that to happen, it brings joy to my heart, being able to do that.
Well, if you know me at all, you know one of my love languages is coffee, and my love of coffee came from my grandmother. With McDonald's. When I was a teenager, that's where it started. She would come to Maine, or when we would come to Michigan, and that would be our little treat. We would just go and get a coffee at McDonald's. And I love that for my kids as well. It's a McDonald's theme. They love going to McDonald's with grandma. They are pumped. So just those, little details. And I just love how my kids light up to do anything with grandma. Make banana bread, color, anything. So that's what I would say.
I have one. From my grandmother, one of my favorite, because we spent a lot of time there. When I was young, we lived next door to them, so I was in between the two houses quite often. But when they moved out to Livonia, it seemed like it was so far. So when we would go there, she had this beautiful garden. She loved peonies. She had all colors of peonies. And she would let me go out, because I loved the flowers and to arrange them. She would let me go out and just cut whatever I want. And she would give me one of her really good bowls, and she would let me arrange them. And I remember one time I was there, and it was April Fool's Day, and I had arranged the flowers on the table. Grandpa came in to sit down and have his oatmeal and stuff, and Grandmother had changed the sugar to salt. So he's sprinkling, and his face was pretty priceless at that moment. And I always remembered how they reacted. It wasn't anger, and he didn't stomp out. And she giggled, and he looked at her like, "What is this?" But it was a sweet memory that I got to observe in their relationship. For me, I think I have lots of memories that I love, but I think the most recent one is when we all went to Universal this last summer. We were all there together. I was very proud to tell you that it was the hottest day of the year, and none of us got sunburned. So I think we did really, really well. But I got to ride a lot of the roller coasters with my grandkids, so I have a lot of good memories for that. And I hope they remember that too when they get older. That, hey, Grandma went on that crazy roller coaster with me. So those are some of my really good memories.
I'm sure that's going to be a huge highlight, especially in the minds of the, 7 grandsons that you have? 8? No, 7 grandsons, yes, and one granddaughter. Yeah. I'm sure that's going to be a huge highlight for them. Well, ladies, in God's providence, and actually in his divine goodness, I got a call this morning that my beloved grandfather passed away this morning in the early hours of the morning. And I don't think that is a mistake at all, that I would be up here this morning moderating this conversation about the importance of grandparents in a child's life. And I am certainly a huge beneficiary of the love and adoration and care of a grandparent in a child's life. I think that it is God's perfect and good timing that he called my grandpa home today when I'm standing on this stage, sitting on this stage, getting to talk to you about all of that. And again, in God's sovereignty and providence, meaning that he has ordained and timed out all things perfectly. I had already planned on sharing that my story of a favorite memory of a grandparent would be about him. when I was in high school, I was a cheerleader. And I will never, ever forget that every Southern California cheer competition we had, my grandpa was there. And here's this sweet, 70-year-old man coming with loud, obnoxious music and girls, and he stuck out like a sore thumb. But I remember all of my friends, we would go out there, we would perform, we would come back, and every one of them, I saw your grandpa. I saw your grandpa. And it just spoke so immensely of that love that we talked about at the very beginning of our time together. It spoke to the fact that he was not there for himself. He was not there because he enjoyed the loud music or the obnoxious girls screaming all the time or the chaos of trying to find parking and navigating to, the gym or wherever the competition was going to be held. He came and he showed up because he loved me, because he adored me, and because he wanted to be a part of something that brought me joy and that I was excited about. I'll never forget one time in those years in high school, I went over to their house, and he had a cheer competition on the TV. And I was like, Grandpa, you're watching the competitive cheer competition? And he was like, oh yeah, because I like it because they explain the lingo. He's like, so I learned today what a basket toss is. And I just remember in that moment being like, wow, my grandpa loves me.
Yes, he does.
So just to reiterate that sweet importance and God's very good and kind gift of giving us grandparents, and what a joy and what sweetness that can be in the life of a child to feel that adoration and that love from not only their parents, but from their grandparents. We had the opportunity in June to go back there. He was in Florida, and visit with him for a few days. And you'll see some pictures here of us sitting and just having those conversations of the family history and the stories being passed down. I think he told me the story of him and my grandma meeting no less than 8 times. I'm not kidding. He kept telling me that story over and over again. But it was so special and so sweet, and memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life. So I just want to encourage you to find those opportunities to create and foster that relationship for your kids, even in moments that it may be hard, even in times where there may be tension in the relationships. The benefit of a grandparent in a child's life is really invaluable, and I am certainly a product of that. And I'm so grateful to God for giving me a grandpa that I could experience that with. So with that, we want to turn you to your tables, and for you to be able to have your table discussions, to keep talking through these things and coming up with ideas and brainstorming of best ways to utilize grandparents in your kids' lives. So thank you for listening, and enjoy your table discussions.